I do storytelling classes, or excuse me, when I do storytelling performances, I always begin with a storyteller's prayer. And the storyteller's prayer, it's something that came to me when I first started. I was watching these older men talk story, and I noticed that they were doing this conjuring. And I didn't understand it fully, but I was hearing them drum, I was hearing them do all these things, and I'm like, they're doing something to not seduce, but to call forth the spirit of the story. And I was listening for my way of being in relationship to story. The storyteller's prayer emerged. And it goes like this: May all the words that need to be heard be spoken, and may all the words that need to be spoken be heard. And I say that before every storytelling event. And I'll explain it to you. May all the words that need to be heard be spoken. That's for you. That prayer is for you, for that place in you that I just asked you to connect to. What aspect of you is pleading to be spoken to be met by life itself? And may all the words that need to be spoken be heard. That prayer is for the muse, for the spirit of the story itself. That what is pleading to be spoken through this vehicle, that may it land upon ears that are ready to receive. So it's a simple prayer. And I offer that as the beginning of our class today in really more of a model of, can you use that prayer? Absolutely. Or do you want to listen for your way of evoking the spirit of the story that wants to come through you? I would invite you to do that first. What's your own relationship that you want to cultivate? And in all of this, in the spirit of what we're going to be going over today in terms of what is it to come into relationship with a sacred story, it's really about, at the very edge of it, the very center of it, the very core of it, it's all about listening. Every storyteller is a listener first. What else would you have to share if you weren't listening, right? So every storyteller is a listener first. So listen for that. Notice that it's not, we didn't say every storyteller is a figure outer first. That wasn't what I said. So that means that when you come to that moment of like, what's my way of conjuring? I just told somebody, one of my favorite moments in life, was I was living in Richmond, Virginia, and I knew that it was my time, and maybe you've had these moments. It was my time to proceed into the next chapter of my life of becoming. And it was going to involve leaving everything that I knew and everything that I had. And I was at the gas station, and I remember I was like, I had the pump in my car, and I was holding it, and I was leaning against my car, and I was sitting there trying to figure it all out, like really trying to figure out my life. And a truck driver walked by me, and he said, "Hey lady, I don't know what you're trying to do, but you're not going to do it like that." It's one of my favorite moments in life. And I don't know what inspired him to reach out of his world and into my world, into such a radical moment where he was so right. There are things that we can't figure out with our heads. Our egos are not going to determine the answer. It is not it's the surrender. It's the letting go and releasing and allowing the answers to come to you. And if there's nothing else I can leave you with today in terms of what it is to come into a relationship with the divinity of storytelling as a sacred act, as an art, as a healing, as an act of healing, it is that to come into that practice of deep surrender and trusting your listening. That doesn't mean trusting all the fear and all the noise and all the psychic insanity of our times. It's coming into that place of knowing that there are elements and pathways of deep connection to earth and spirit, that when you find yourself into those currents, you can be carried by life and you can be very well informed. So same with this, if you're looking at how to conjure your story, and how to come to the spirit. And so you don't have to do it all by yourself. God forbid you have to tell a story all by yourself, because it's really no fun. We've been to those events, right? When you're watching someone, maybe they're singing, or maybe I was at an event the other night, there was music, there was no spirit there. And those musicians, they were working so hard. They were working so hard, but the spirit was not with them, you know. And we feel it, we know it. And so when we do this conjuring, it's so that we've got a great ally. We're not just doing it on our own. We're doing it in companionship. So I'm getting ahead of myself. I never have done gone off on this way. Jennifer knows that. She's seen these before. So let us begin, as I usually do, with just some good old wise words. And I love to start with some words by Rebecca Solnit. She is definitely speaking truth to power, firecracker of a woman. And she gives us this. We think we tell stories, but stories often tell us. They tell us to love or to hate, to see or be seen. And often, too often, stories saddle us and they ride us and they whip us onward. Let's just take a second to think about that. Look around the world right now. We're in a world made of stories. So let's just listen to that. And I want to invite you in this moment to to really listen for what are the stories that are doing this. The stories tell us to love or to hate, to see or be seen. And often, too often, stories will saddle us and they will ride us and they will whip us onward, telling us what to do. And this is where I disagree with her. She says, and we do it without questioning. Using that we, that's a mess. I have no idea what you're doing, but so we can say, and a lot of people are doing it without questioning. The task of learning to be free requires learning to hear those stories, to question those stories, to pause and hear silence, to name them, and then become a storyteller. That is Rebecca Solnit. Welcome, Tristan. What a sweet thing to get to see your face in this room. So here's what we're doing today. We're going to do. We've already started. We started. It's a strategy. It's a technique in good storytelling. We started in the middle. Every good novel will start in the middle. And I'm gonna introduce you a little bit more in a concrete way to what does it mean to have story as a sacred art form. I'm going to tell you a little short story. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about some opportunities to dive more into storytelling with me. And all along the way, this is a collective experience we are creating together. So I'm going to ask some questions. I'm really asking them. What you say will wholeheartedly inform the direction of where we go. So don't be shy in your answers. Allow your inspiration to come through you. Honestly, there's no wrong answer for any of these questions. It's great. There's no trick quiz. It's really just about what is inspiring and coming through you. So I have a great bio. It's on the things. I'm not going to read it today. I'm just going to go into class. Okay. So ancient wisdom when it comes to talking about story. Hawaiians believe that words are so powerful. Hawaiians believe that words are so powerful that they can raise enough energy to slow the world or to set it into motion. If you ever have a chance to get to go see hula, go on YouTube. See, not the thing in Hawaii Five-0, not what has been sexualized and performanceized, but it's a living, embodied prayer by a culture that has maintained their culture and their pride. And they understand, still to this day, that their embodied prayer, while combined with words, can call the rain, can honor the fires, to come into resonance with people who know the power of their language. Just go stand near it. It's contagious. It's incredible. Sicilians believe that words can poke holes in the universe. I always think about this when I get a little angry, and I think that Sicilians might know something about having fiery tempers. Once we say something, it can't ever be taken back. If we're lucky, we're in relationship with people that know how to do repair. But that's more and more rare these days, it feels like. So I'm not saying be silent. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that once we say something, there's actually a word in physics, and It means that the words, it actually, that it stays in that space, that the words never leave the space. I think about that when I was driving across the country during COVID, and I'd go by these really ugly, ugly truck stops. That's what they're ugly to me. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, but they didn't look like very well loved land. And I thought, wow, I can just sit here and I can bring some love into this place right now, just with the power of a few words and a song, and leave it behind forever. And what is it to understand that our words are that powerful for positive or for not? You know. Australians believe that the stories of the past must be sung to the present so that the future can exist. The Maori say that words don't describe a thing, that they are the thing. In Japan, there's a word called kotodama, and it means word spirit, and it refers to the original divine spirit of a word before it even enters the world of thought waves. So the significance of kotodama is that words are alive and that they have power to create. Which brings us straight into abracadabra, one of the oldest words on the planet. I create as I speak. So these words, it's like, I love, word, world, all connected, and that we are seeing that, the words that, look at what's happening in our world right now and how powerful words are. And so now we are really in this place of, but how do we know if words are trustworthy? It's one of the great questions of our time. How do we be in relationship with our stories? So let's get into this. What is a story? I'm going to ask you this as a real question. What is it? What is a story? Again, there's no wrong answer. That's just what is coming alive in you. And in these moments, you can say it out loud. You can put it in the chat room. That we all have different learning styles. Some of us, we need to really think something through very wholly and completely, and then we can speak it. And some of us are, it's a more introvert expression of it. Some of us are extroverts, meaning that we figure it out as we speak. I'm going to invite you into the practice of eloquence. And eloquence is that piece where, you feel it. You feel the spirit wanting to come through you. Your heart might start to pitter patter. You kind of know it's time, but you don't know what you're going to say because it's not just you speaking. And so you slow down and you allow what wants to come through just to speak. So you can just speak what is coming through you. So, okay, what is a story? What are we talking about here? And you can put it in the chat box. You can say it out loud. Just what comes to mind when you think of what defines a story?
When I first came on, I had shared life as a story. Now I think that story is almost guidance, is a guide to reflection of life and lessons that we need to learn.
Yeah. I really appreciate that story as a guide to lessons we need to learn. And there's a word in Welsh, the word in Welsh that describes storyteller. I can't pronounce it. It's like this beautiful 5-syllable word that sounds like a song. And it basically means a guide between the worlds. That is the etymology of what a storyteller is in Welsh. And you reminded me of a little story that I just heard. I've been working with a Taekwondo coach, and because it's like, what better, it just feels like going through life right now. It just feels like you got to be a real mastery of how to maneuver the energies of our time. And he told me this story, and the story is it takes place in an ancient old village, and this young girl in this ancient old village gets pregnant, And as you might imagine, in those times, it was not a good thing for a young, unwed girl to become pregnant. And when she told her parents, because she couldn't keep the secret any longer, they were horrified and embarrassed, and all the things that they were afraid would befall on them. And they yelled at her and they said, "Well, who did this to you?" You know, God forbid she be a participant in this. "Who did this to you?" And in her fear, she said, uh, "The monk, the main monk." And so they drag her over to the main monk who's supposed to be their spiritual teacher. And they were like, "How dare you do this, you horrible person?" You know, and he just looked at them and he said, "Is that so?" They dragged their daughter back. When she gave birth, they dragged the child back to him. They put it in his hands. They're like, "That's your child. You take care of it." He welcomed it into his arms. He said, "Is that so?" He was helped by different people to raise the child. Some time went by. The young girl couldn't take the pain of being separated from her child anymore, or carry the lie of the love that she actually experienced with the man who she'd created that life with. And so she went back to her parents. She said, "I have to tell you the truth. I'm in love with the fisherman's son, and we want to get married, and we want to raise our child." And they dragged their daughter back to the monk, and they were like, "Oh my God, you're amazing. You're an amazing man to be so generous and kind to take care of this child that isn't yours." And he says, "Is that so?" He wasn't tricked by the ups and downs of life. That as if one up was better than one down, or one down was better than one up. He was a man that knows that life will continue in cycles. And so, what else is a story? So yeah, they can act as guides. They can guide us through the times. And I love that story right now, just because we're in the ups and downs of life right now. There is so much going on. You know, it looks like this is happening. No, it looks like that's happening. No, this is happening. You know, and to have that, is that so, inside of us. There's a lot of old stories that guide us into seeing what looks like a curse could be a blessing, and what looks like a blessing could be a curse. And how do we keep that steady lake of peace inside of us when there's so much chaos and turmoil around us? Baba Jean is saying that it's an, oh gosh, you guys, I need glasses now. This is very new to me. Like, hold on. Is an explanation, a representation of experience, a metaphor for awareness, a modeling of cultural ideals, a prism. It's a prison and a key. Ah, gosh, Baba Jean, that is just like poetry right there. And I'm going to pick this thread on it. A metaphor for awareness. A metaphor, I heard this from Carolyn Casey, and I think it's just very commonly known. Metaphor is the language of spirit. So I always think about this. You know, I'm going to go to, if you go to Ecuador, you're going to learn Spanish, right? If you go to Paris, you will learn French. And if you go to the land of story, you will learn symbol and archetype and metaphor, for that is the language of that landscape. You know, so this is the kind of issue that we're getting in these wild times, right? Because it's been forgotten that you actually have to speak the language of story to understand it. It does not speak in literal terms. It speaks through metaphor. So when we as humans lose one of our first languages, which was symbol, you know, when we lose our relationship to archetype, which is those universal structures that live through in all of us, when we lose our relationship to metaphor, we lose our relationship to that hearing what is not being said, what is being shown. We can lose a relationship to story. It's always there for you. That's just it. It's like you can't really lose it, but there is a slowing down and accessing a different part of your brain, because one side of our brain gets very literal, and our other side of the brain is what speaks in the language of story. And so it requires a wholeness in you to experience story, which brings us to the wholeness of life. That's why I love getting to be a sacred storyteller. Because if you really stand as a sacred storyteller, you understand that in order for the sun to exist, so must the moon, right? In order for the ocean to be there, so must be the desert. and it creates more space inside of you for the wholeness of life. It's a really beautiful thing to get to be a sacred storyteller in our time, because to me, it's the key out of a lot of mess when there's more and more space for the wholeness of life. Okay, so Beth is saying that it's about experience, encounter, and relationship. Absolutely. Absolutely. No story can be told without a listener, right? I mean, where's the fun in that? It's no fun at all, And there's a real magical thing that happens, and I'm going to show it to you right now. Okay, here we go. You ready? Once upon a time, not so long ago, not so far away, there was this big, beautiful ocean. And there was a bubble, a huge bubble, that rested on the bottom of that ocean. And in that bubble, there was an elephant. And on that elephant rested a princess. She was the most beautiful thing anyone had ever seen. She farted rainbows and burped stars. Okay. How many of you saw that image? Okay. So we location traveled, we reality bended, we created an aspect of beauty without defining it. I want to point that out. I didn't tell you what beauty looked like. I left space in your own imagination for you to fill in that blank. It's a real choice as a storyteller. So we didn't use VR. We didn't use AI. We just used this very ancient technology it's called neural coupling. And basically, an image in my brain started going beep, 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 and it started creating that image. And as that image came to me, I spoke it out loud. And then upon hearing it, the same part of your brain went doop, 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 doop. I don't know the exact sound. And it created this same image. It's mind blowing. We got to travel without spending any gasoline, and it was great. So this is old technology of co-creating reality together. We co-create reality together. And that's how powerful storytellers are. When you really want to know who holds the power, it's actually the greatest magic trick on the planet. Because you think I'm going to say the storyteller. It's the listener. It's just like, I don't want to be crude, but it's just like sex. Look, you can have all the desire in the world, but if the other person does not receive you, it does not happen in a good way, right? It's the person who is receiving that has the power of the connection, of allowing the connection to happen. Same thing when you are in that space of receiving a story. You're the one that holds the power about whether or not this story will be created, whether or not it has a garden to grow in, whether or not it will be repeated ever again. So I invite you to really think about what stories are you giving your extraordinary miracle of a life force to? What stories will you carry? What stories will you repeat? What stories will you amplify? So a story is a sequencing of referencing of actions, events, and emotions, says Tristan. Right, it's a sequence. So they're going to go on a journey. Okay, you're going to go from one place to another. That's definite. They're not going to usually leave you in one spot unless it's waiting for Godot. Corinne says it's a perspective that brings imagery. Yes. Serbi is saying a beautiful caged bird's being set free. Simone is saying story is the language of eternal soul, guiding us into creation, into present time. Beautiful total oh my gosh, equanimity. Deborah is saying a story is an opportunity to see, hear beauty of languages spoken or written word. And it's an invocation of place and time, events layered sequentially to reveal facts of life, says Clemmy. That's an interesting word, this whole fact. We can go into information, we can go into the language of truth. You know what truth is? This is a good word to know the etymology. The etymology of truth is a carpentry term. It means a straight line from here to here. That's why you can be in a really heated argument with somebody. Facets. Thank you, Clemmy. Um, you can be a really heated argument. You're like, well, my truth is, and you're absolutely both right because your perspective is what truth means. So when we look at all these different truths, if I was to talk about as a mythic storyteller from the future about the times that we're living in, I'd be like, oh, those were the times of many stories happening at once. And so we're being asked to do something that no other human race has ever been asked to do before, is to live next to so many different stories of culture, of history, of all the perspective, all next to each other. We used to live in groups where we had the same creation stories and the same foundational morals and the same foundational value systems. We were taught the same stories. And then we lived with people who were also taught those stories, and we lived within those stories together. And then people started to break out of that, right? Migration happened, and immigration happened. And now we're in this world where many different people with many different perspectives and many different origins are living next to each other. It's a freaking miracle. So in one hand, you can say, oh my God, racism and sexism, and it's all these things and all the isms, and that's really true too. But like as a storyteller, you get to look at the long story. This is a chapter. This is a chapter in a really big story. And look at so many people coming alive in this chapter to say, how can we define how the next chapter can be different? I am seeing Janet.
Oh,
Yes.
you know what? You said truth is a straight line.
Yeah.
What came to my mind is a tightrope.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine walking on that with your truth, you know?
Yeah. Right. Right. Love it. It's a balancing act. All right. So if we understand that beautiful part, now if we say, okay, so that's a story, a sacred story. What makes a story sacred? What makes a story sacred? Why would we employ that language? I'm seeing a lot of typing going on down there. Jennifer's saying it's about connection.
Connectivity.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. So connectivity. So something happens when we hear a sacred story. We feel connected. Our hearts can open. We feel a lot enlivened. We feel, gosh, tomorrow morning I want to exercise and I'm going to quit sugar and caffeine and do all the things and like yes to life, right? You just get enthralled. You might see someone really inspiring, like yes, okay. Beth is saying that it's sacred set aside holy, not common breath. That there's some such beautiful and what I'm hearing, there's such beauty in that, and what I'm hearing is that it's not in everyday life is what I'm hearing in that. I'm not quite sure I'm putting in that. There's gems of wisdom, says Serby in there. Yeah. So look, when we call something sacred, it's kind of a setup because why is this sacred? And then I don't use this as sacred. So this gets to be acknowledged as being a source of life and having life living within it, but this doesn't because I didn't use that word. So it's a weird language. It's kind of trap. I would love it so that we put the word sacred out of business because we just start integrating it so wholly and seeing the life in all things. So when I'm saying a story is sacred, I'm saying I see the divinity in you, I see the life in you, I see the spirit in you. Right? So I'm saying, okay, when I am alive in a sacred story, I am in communion and connection with spirit. When I'm telling a sacred story, I know it's not just me speaking the story. That's why I look at all of you. I'm not looking at myself when I'm talking story. I'm looking at you because I'm speaking to you. I'm allowing what wants to come through to you. It's a communion, as someone said. Okay, so that's nice. That's all poetic. A sacred story is this, it's got the spirit in it. I often think of it like, look, I think a lot of people agree, there's this body, and here we have this body, and there's a soul, and the soul gets to inhabit this body, right? And then I think of story is a vehicle, that spirit lives inside of. And so when I engage the vehicle of a story, the spirit lives through me to that story. It's one way of playing with that idea. So that's nice. Okay, we've got a sacred story. What's a zombie story? What's the flip side of it? You know, and a zombie story to me is a story that is not giving life, that is not in service to life. So a sacred story, you can take me to the horrors of the world and back. You know, someone said a storyteller is a guide. You can show me the most, you can shed light on the most darkest acts of humanity in a sacred way, in a sacred story, when you're telling that story to serve life. And so when you're telling that story to serve life, I know that you're telling that story so that I can come to this place, that I can come to the threshold of healing or facing something that needs to be faced. And I know that you're going to take me out to the other side. And there's something very key to me when talking in this way around story, that your stories are going to have beauty in them. There's an amazing film that you can go see right now called The Territory. It's if you Google The Territory, and it's for free right now on National Geographic. It's about what's happening right now in Brazil in the rainforests. And there was this beautiful thing that happened where the filmmakers had to leave, and so they gave the indigenous people their cameras to keep filming. And so they got this amazing footage. But what was really, truly amazing is that you got to see the forest not through someone else's eyes, a foreigner's eyes. You got to see the forest through the eyes of those who lived there. It is the most beautiful film that tells one of the hardest stories. And so, and I left feeling enlivened, inspired, and ready to fight. You know, I had energy, not distraught. So this is where I'd say this is a very key ingredient to our soul stories, to our stories, which is that you're going to need to have beauty in them, because beauty feeds the soul. And beauty shows up in so many different ways. So poke holes in the universe with your stories. We need that, and infuse it with beauty. And then a zombie story. There are zombie stories. They're feeding on life. You know, I can spot a zombie story because it plants fear. It plants divisiveness. It creates separation. It's just not in service of life. And sometimes they're sneaky because they say that they're in service of life, but they're planting little seeds of fear and doubt everywhere among them. So as sacred storytellers, I always feel like I get to put my sacred storytelling goggles on and look out at the world, you know. And it's just like when you go snorkeling, you know, you go snorkeling without goggles, you know, it's like, it's just kind of blurry. You can't really see. And you're like, I hope there's not a shark out there. Not the sharks are bad. I love sharks. They're so good and sweet, most of them. You know, I've been around. I was petting a shark a little while ago. They're just they got such a bad rap because of a dangerous zombie story. Jaws, one of the most dangerous stories on the planet. And I use this story as a warning. I'm not going to go into the wholeness of it. But Peter Benchley wrote that book. Steven Spielberg produced that movie. Always ask what your storyteller is in service to. It is a worthy question. What are they in service to? That movie spread so much fear that it was single-handedly responsible for massive kill-offs of sharks around the planet, a keystone species that is connected to our own health and wellness, not just the oceans. When Peter Benchley, the creator of that story, realized what had happened because of the story that he wrote, he spent the rest of his life being an ocean protector and trying to do his best to heal that. So I use it as a cautionary tale. I use it as a cautionary tale because, you know, the beautiful part about being a storyteller is we get to have evolutionary experiences in our consciousness from what other people's mistakes are. And I don't like to use that word mistake. I like to use the word misstep, and here's why. Because a mistake, to me, I don't know about you, it puts me down the shame spiral. You know, blah, blah, blah. And we know that shame is like kind of a pretty useless emotion. It's not a lot of productivity can happen from it. But when I do things and they're a misstep from being in alignment with my connection to life force, alignment with how I'm in the full expression of embodiment or essence or greatest highest self, right? And so sometimes we make missteps because that's just kind of what life is. It's not a straight line. It's just not, you know? And so we're always making missteps, and that's where we get to learn. And so when we learn, we're like, oh, that's what it feels like to be out of alignment. I'd like to get back in. You know, it can be that simple. You know, oh, whoops. You know, I'm sorry. Now I'm going to get back in. You know? And and so with our storytelling, we get to claim our missteps as being evolutionary places where we learn how much we want to be in alignment. And so that's what we're doing this coming uh, November. Is I'm going to be going into teaching stories. So, and this is where I'm going to make a little adjustment into what our day is about, which is if you wanted to come and get a little taste of the landscape of sacred storytelling, that was our class for today. I'm going to take a few moments now and talk a little bit about the upcoming classes and what we're up to, and if you want to come into the field of play with us. And if you have any questions, I'll be here, and then we'll end straight on the hour. So teaching stories is, you know, what I did is I created some beautiful trouble over COVID. And we all got to kind of come into that deep listening, right? Around, you know, we all did different things during COVID. And one of the things I did was I looked very carefully at what was I offering in the world, you know, and how was the School for Sacred Storytelling going? It had been in play for about 4 years. And I realized that we would do these big, long programs. And the big long programs were really fun. And they bring in these amazing master teachers, Michael Meade, Carolyn Casey, Stephen Jenkinson, Charles Eisenstein, people that you know, and a lot of people that you didn't know who had just had extraordinary contributions to what it is to stand as a sacred storyteller. How do you get your vehicle ready to be in relationship? And I realized that 9-month classes aren't for everybody. It's just not, you know, and that's great. That's just the reality. How much can we handle of this Zoom world? But what I learned, and as I really talked to people, and as I said, well, how can I make the strongest, most potent offering? I realized, you know what, these 4-week and 6-week modules are kind of the it. You know, this is where we can have focus, clarity, and a clear outcome in that time. And so I completely changed the entire program. And I'm going to just show you the essence of it, and I'm going to show you where we are in it, and show you this beautiful little graphic of what kind of trouble we're getting ourselves into. I should call it a beautiful trouble. So this is basically what the concept is based on, is that here we are this great vehicle for story, and it goes and the stories live in all the different channels of our body, you know. And if the energies get stuck, then our capacity to our life force also gets a little stuck, and we don't get full access to life. So it's funny because as our path of being a storyteller, there's this real access to our path of our expression of life itself. It's like it's all connected. And so right now we are entering into, so we did all these, we've been going through these chakras, and we do these creative, they're called these sanctuary courses, where we do these creative intensives, and we really look at what are all the stories that are there, how can we move that energy, how can we alchemize that energy, and how can we do it through the experience of ritual with the land, and through a community experience, and through creative expression, and through storytelling. So it's fun. You know, while the world's doing what it's doing, we are in here having a lot of fun, moving around a lot of energy. And that's, I gotta say, that's one of my thrills and delights of this time. So right now we're here, we're talking teaching stories. And teaching stories, these are 4-week skills classes. And I'll be right with you, Tristan. These are 4-week storytelling skills classes. And so here you come in and you get to learn the ancient craft of teaching stories. So this is almost a lost art. And really was brought to my attention when I was listening to a Lakota man, and I wish I could remember his name, talk about how he had almost lost his relationship with teaching stories, how he had this 3-year-old son. He was, you know, doing what 3-year-olds do and running around and taking food off of people's plates and being all kinds of naughty. And he realized that all he was doing was saying no. And so he said, I forgot about teaching stories. And so they went home that night and they made up a story together about good otter and bad otter. Good otter does this, bad otter does that. Then when they go out and they're doing things, and his son is being 3 and doing all his things, all he has to do is look at his son and say, are you being good otter or bad otter? And now you're actually employing a story as a member, as a community member, as an extra auntie, to be in relationship with your young ones. So we're going to work on stories for our young ones, but we're going to also work on our stories for adults, and teaching stories, which is like, wow, you know what? I made a really big mistake last week, and it's a big one, and I could keep it all to myself, and go into that game of story of shame or whatever. Or I could say, you know what? You know, I don't want anyone to make that mistake. That's a teaching story. So I'm going to claim the beauty of being alive, and what it is to make a misstep, and to really claim all the lessons, and all the teachings, so that I don't ever have to do that again, and so that you don't have to do that either. So we're going to get to come out of that class with two different kinds of teaching stories, and that starts on November 8th and goes. We meet on Tuesdays for 2 hours. From 11 to 1. We also have a really lucky thing happening where Joshua Townsend is going to be visiting us. And he is actually my coach when I do storytelling events. He comes in and coaches me, and he'll be offering some performance enhancing feedback. So everyone will get to come in and get to share a couple minutes of their story and get some feedback for how to really step even more into the embodiment of their story. So that's really fun. I'm just going to tell you these one other things, and then Tristan, I'm going to come to you. Then in January, we'll take the holidays off. We're going to come back in January, and it's the very last chakra class, and we're going to go into Speak Your Spark. And this is all about using your voice for power and purpose. And that's it is one of the most exciting, fun, vibrant classes, and I'm very excited to be doing that in January. Then we're going to come back out and we're going to do Cantadora. This is the only class that I teach where it is about carrying old stories. You'll get to learn how to carry an old story. If you want to join us for that, start researching your old stories now, because you're going to get to come with one that you're going to practice with, and you're going to get to learn a lot of old stories from around the globe. So as I said, the Australians say we must carry those old stories in order for the future to exist, and that's where we get to learn how to carry another story with integrity. And then our final class is going to be Vision Stories. And that's all about planting beautiful stories for the future. We've got a lot of, I would say our future's been hijacked, by all these stories of horror and death and destruction. There's so many other opportunities. There's so many opportunities for our future, so many possibilities, but they will only exist if we dare to speak them. And so it's really about how to plant those into our world. So this is actually the final semester of a 1.5 year long program, and it's the last time I'm going to be teaching this program, because I'm going to go on and be teaching other different things and doing more live events, and I'm doing a work of stories initiation, which I'll talk a little bit about that. Tristan, did you have a question? Does anyone have questions about all that? And I'll put the links on here right now.
Thanks, Leah. Can you hear me?
I can.
No, I just wanted to invite you to our 7 chakra gardens in Peru and do some of your course down here with us at Wilcatica. That's where I'm sitting right now in Peru with us in our 7 chakra gardens. So it aligns with what you just.
I love it. I want to do that. You guys, this is, if you are going to Peru, Tristan and Terry are the stewards of a beautiful, beautiful retreat center right in the Sacred Valley. And holy cow, what a thing to go to. So yes, thank you, Tristan. I totally want to do that. Okay, so you guys heard it here. Storytelling in Peru, 2023. We got to figure it out. Okay, I'm going to put teaching stories right here. Any other questions? Okay, hi Mary. Hi Shauna. The other thing that I'm just going to say is that I'm going to plant a couple of seeds, and I hate to confuse you. I have a really beautiful woman who's been trying to convince me to do exactly not what I'm about to do. Okay, she says, Leah, only tell them about one thing. It's like taking people to cereal aisle. I get confused. And I was like, I understand, but I'm multidimensional. There's just a lot going on. So I'm gonna break all the rules. Don't tell Melissa. So the main thing that's happening is we have the teaching stories happening in November. And you can, yeah, it's going to be an amazing class. I'm very excited for it, and really right for these times. It's like the more that we can claim our learning moments, the more that we can show up for what is being asked of us in life right now. And so it's like it's a bold class, and you'll be asked to be bold and courageous inside of it. Um, and then there's also the final semester. And if you're like, wow, I really want to join that whole final semester, the last hurrah, I'm going to do something very wild for you. And I'm going to give you the early bird special, which ended on the 20th. Okay, and that would be $400 of savings. So if you're like, wow, I just want to go on this last ride and really come out with a lot of confidence and clarity about who I am as a storyteller, with a lot of different stories in my pocket, and know what my way is, that is there for you. And I will extend that to you guys for the next 24 hours. We'll send you an email with the special code, and you'll get that. The other thing that's about to happen, and this is where Melissa would just have my head, but don't tell her, is that starting in December, if you're someone that you're like, wow, I've been initiated by life, and I don't have a place to fully stand in that, and the potency of what's happened to me, and life is initiating us all the time, but we don't live in a culture that celebrates and honors initiations. Is that I'm going to be creating a program just for that, and it's going to be 3 months long. And initiations can look like health crises. An initiation can look like a massive change in direction of your life. An initiation, we know they look like marriages. It could look like, it could be a woman that doesn't get married and still wants to make a commitment to life and a commitment to that kind of what happens in the space of that. So we're going to be really looking at different ways of standing into and owning the power of where life is initiating us, and which initiations we're choosing or have chosen us. And you're going to come out with a story to tell in a very in-depth ritual expression. So there'll be some of it will be online, and then the final piece will be in person. So if you're interested in that, email me at info@leolam, and we'll make sure that you get the information. The other thing that's happening, I'm in so much trouble for telling you guys all this, is that in March we're going to do a Writing with the Whales writing retreat, and that's going to be in Baja, Mexico. And I'm doing that in collaboration with OCR, which is a ocean conservation organization, and we're going to get to go hang out with the gray whales and write about it. So that's going to be all kinds of fun. Okay, that is all from me today. I'm sending you off with some wise words from Ben Okri. And Simone is asking, 4-week class and then 6-week class in January with separate prices, correct? Yes. So teaching stories is one class, Speak Your Spark is another class. If you know that you want all the storytelling classes, which is Speak Your Spark, Teaching Stories, Cantadora, and Vision Stories, if you're like, I want the final semester, then we have one payment, and you can do a payment plan, or you can do one payment. And so it all works. It's all depending on how you want to handle that. Okay, now we get to, or you can just do them separately. That's what Simone was getting to. Okay, so Ben Okri, this is one of the most amazing books. I love it. He is just master depthful. That's not a word, but that's okay. A story is a spirit essence. It wanders the ether till an open heart, a receptive mind gives it habitation. And so may your stories be blessed. May you create a home for stories. And I send you all off with lots of good wishes and blessings and wells. And hopefully I get to share the realm of story with you sometime soon. And I invite you to take yourselves off of mute and say hello and goodbye.
Hello.
And
Bye.
be well.
Thank you.
Hello, that was wonderful.
Beautiful. Very
Thank you.
powerful. Thank you, Leah.
Thank you. Thank you, Leah. That was amazing. So rich in content. Thank you so much.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's amazing how an hour of story can really just brighten your day.
I know, right? Thank you all for being here.
Beautiful.